Holodeck 3 program is reinstated.
Open sesame!
Commander Klingon vessel. We are energizing transporter beam. Now.
One, engage!
All right. Hello. Welcome, everyone, to Star Trek from the Holodeck. I am Michael, and we're here today to talk about Star Trek Picard Season 3, Episode 5. And in the studio with me to rant and rave and praise is David. Hello.
I was about to say, not rant, probably rave more than anything else because, dude, okay, he's won me over. Metalis has won me over.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid.
Well, hopefully we're not jumping the gun on this.
I hope so, too.
Hopefully the quality maintains itself throughout. We still have 5 episodes to go, but David, I am there with you. This episode is just another great episode on top of another great episode. And I have so many thoughts solely from an Uber fan perspective. I mean, Michelle Forbes reprising her role as Ro Lauren, something I didn't expect, but was more than appropriate when looking at the overall narrative and story intent this season.
Oh, absolutely. And the way they make her character important is it's a slap in the face of Michael Chabon and how he treated the Borg character.
Why you always got to bring up the past?
Well, because you got to use the parallels, Mike.
I want to kill the past when it comes to
you
that.
Want to kill we do
topic.
kill the past in this episode. But
yeah.
the way Metalis treated Ro Loren's character, her legacy in this one, absolutely outshines what we got in season 1 with the Borg character that was taken off the board by Michael Chabon and really amounted to nothing.
Yeah, you're talking about Hugh. Yeah,
and it's like the way the way Hugh was treated, and you compare that to Ro Loren, and you go, "Wow, Metalis understands the importance of the quote unquote the term everyone's been using with the Picard series, legacy character. When you bring in a legacy character, you bring in all of their baggage, all of their character, and you understand that character from the get-go.
Yeah, and you're not ignoring things out of convenience for your story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so we had that, which we're going to get into in detail in just a moment here. And then we had Worf finally come into contact with Picard and Riker, which I thought was... I just giggled a bit like a nerd when the transmission was going through, and I'm like, that's going to be Worf. You better answer
that. and the beautiful part too is like the interaction of all the crew, or at least the 3 of them.
Yeah.
And the fact that their interaction tied so well with their characters' backgrounds, connections to Ro Loren was just seamlessly done.
Well, everything was connected.
Everything felt
that's going to be a big part
connected.
We're going to be talking about, because everything is connected. Nothing is just there. This is how you write a TV show, Dave. Everything that is being pushed forward is interwoven with the next bit of story. Characters, their actions, their past, as you mentioned.
Yes.
It's all being used to help propel the narrative forward. You have the USS Titan being forced to flee from the Intrepid, and through that whole sequence, we were given some amazing visual effects.
Oh, absolutely.
To see the Intrepid get their nacelle blasted, and then they have this typical, it was a naval shot. Imagine these were submarines.
Yes.
And the fact, I've never seen a Starfleet ship captured the way they captured the Intrepid when it got shot. Started drifting downwards like a submarine. Then as it regains its bearings, it starts coming up. I mean, it was... I can't say enough about the things they're doing this season. You have the back and forth between Shaw, Riker, and Picard about saving the universe versus the downside of their success.
Yes.
And then, of course, the changelings are evolving into something kind of different.
Are we going to say it?
Yes, David.
Yes.
We do have to worry when we find ourselves in a world where David and Ryan are the two people who are right with all their theories across the board on this network. Like,
I know.
and it's not an insult. It's not an insult. It's simply, if people have been around this network long enough, know that you have outlandish theories.
Hell yeah.
That
And
have never come to fruition until now.
You ever notice that basically whenever I come up with my theories, I go, a part of me even feels, nah, that's too dumb, or that's too crazy. That can't work.
And you know what? And that's not being used as a negative, because it's all about execution.
Yeah,
you
it really does.
You can put anything on paper, and it could either be an amazing or it can be a pile of turds if you're not executing it correctly.
Exactly.
And that's why some of these ideas you say, yeah, I'm like, I'm like, no, that's awful. But it's about the execution. And of course, we have Jack Crusher's apparent psychotic break.
Yeah.
That we were, because of that, we were given some actually a pretty cool action sequence.
Dude, I love what they're doing with it.
Did you see when he shot those 4 changelings and that one that was missed? The final death, and it did this weird thing with his body.
Yes.
It reverted to gelatinous state just enough so it can flip its legs.
Yes.
And then crawled up like a monster, like almost like a creature.
Yeah, and then the way that basically, it's almost the way they do Jack stuff is very Bourne Identity.
Yeah.
Where he basically doesn't realize what's happening.
Yeah.
And then it's almost like a switch gets flipped. And in Bourne Identity, Jason Bourne in the very first movie, when you see it, doesn't realize what he's doing. And
he doesn't know his identity.
He doesn't know his identity. But with Jack, it was so cool watching him suddenly flip a switch and suddenly he pulls out the phaser and just starts gunning people down. And then the way he walked up to the one person and just shot them point blank.
Yeah.
I was like, that was really cool.
Well, we're going to probably tackle that topic towards the end of our discussion. And because you seem to be hitting all bullseyes here, you better have some theories, because I want to see what you think this is going to be.
Oh, I have a doozy.
And you better not have watched ahead. Have you watched ahead? Because we are, as of recording this, we're slightly behind because we went on to spring break.
Yeah. No, I didn't. That's why prior to the show, I asked you, we're only covering this episode, right? Because, dude, I wanted to so bad.
Yeah. I wanted to as well, but I feel like when we know too much, our immediate discussion is not as good.
Yes.
Because we already know things.
And honestly, because I haven't watched ahead, it gives me more time to think of crazy theories. And I am going to have a crazy ass theory right now.
All right, well, hold on. We'll get to that, because I am anxious, but we got to save it to the end. Okay, so this episode is titled Imposters. It is the 5th episode of season 3. The synopsis: caught by Starfleet and facing court-martial, paranoia grows as Picard struggles to uncover whether a prodigal crewman from his past has returned as an ally or an enemy hell-bent on destroying them all. Let's officially start with the Ro Loren stuff.
Please, because that had me giddy.
This is something I did not expect to say, mostly because Michelle Forbes, as most Star Trek fans know, passed on Deep Space Nine because she didn't really want to have anything else to do with the series.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, or with the franchise, and not necessarily because she didn't like it. She did like her run on Star Trek, but she had wanted to pursue a feature film career.
Yeah, she wanted to really honestly take her career that next step.
Yeah, so in turn, or in doing so, she effectively ended her run in Star Trek, because I think most Star Trek fans figured, well, when you betray Captain Picard and join a terrorist organization, chances are your story's over, at least from the Star Trek side. and that's a good way to kind of just send her off to the sunset, especially when you take into account that we knew we weren't going to get any more of her because that was the penultimate episode of the entire series.
Yeah. Well, the thing that was a shame too was like there wasn't really any aftermath of that whole scenario because of how dramatic that storyline between her and Picard went. And
I don't think we ever needed more.
Yeah, I agree with you. It really didn't need it, especially with her joining the Maquis. But there was always, I know for a fact that a lot of fans felt they wish they got a resolution or a conclusion between the two characters because of how intertwined the two characters were, meaning to each other, especially since Picard and Ro Loren, for about a season, dude, a full season, maybe 2 seasons.
No, longer than that, but it was spaced out over, I think, 9 episodes.
9 episodes. Yeah. Ro Loren was poised to be the protege of Jean-Luc Picard. You know, she was the one that it wasn't, you know, people make the joke, oh, it was supposed to be Wesley because of course we want Wesley Crusher to be like treated like a son of Picard.
It was a completely different dynamic. And I mean, David, see, now I don't feel like we needed to see Loren at any point post what we've seen in Star Trek The Next Generation's final season. I feel like it did what it needed to do.
Yeah.
In fact, you and I had discussed or have discussed on numerous discussions on our Patreon exclusive shows when we were talking about the key defining features of Picard, like his characterization. And we had said, well, if we had to pick at least 4 or 5 things that would define who Picard is and will become. And I believe this was actually I believe this conversation was actually paralleling season 1 because we weren't quite happy with what they were doing with Picard. It didn't really make a lot of sense that this is the version of this character we get. It just didn't sync with everything we've seen prior. And we had talked about that. I believe we said the Borg was number 1.
Borg was number 1.
Forever shaped who he is and will become.
Yeah.
And we mentioned the betrayal of Ro. Because we didn't need anything else because the powerful way that episode ended.
Yeah.
If you guys out there have not watched the episode in a long time and you don't remember Patrick Stewart's performance when Riker walks into his office and says she's joined the Maquis, he doesn't even say a word.
Yeah, he just stares out into space.
He stares out. The camera drifts into a closer shot. Fade out. The episode ends. You're like, what the fuck? And his face said it all. It showed what he verbalized in this episode or vocalized in this episode, the heartbreak that she broke his heart.
Yeah.
We got that in that final shot. So when he said that, it gave us fans that little bit of not reconciliation, but nod.
Closure.
Closure. The fact that we understood that because we saw it, and now we hear him actually saying something. And I don't think a Picard, if this was before the 2nd season, when he made his emotional breakthrough, another great thing that Metalis did, showing us why Picard's so closed emotionally. I don't feel like we would have had this little conversation.
I don't think so either.
So it shows you the strategy between seasons. Let's open him up emotionally. Let's allow him to be someone who can actually be vulnerable. And then have this scene here where he opens his heart. He is vulnerable in a way that I really wasn't expecting, and it actually sold the scene between the two of them that much more, because once he said that, you then had Michelle Forbes' performance.
And that, oh my God.
And just her reaction, realizing the hurt she did to him, and then affirming the fact or asserting the fact that she also was haunted by how their relationship ended.
And not the fact that the regret she had was breaking Picard's heart.
Yes,
but
not her decision.
Her basically telling Picard that I just wanted you to see me, is like, it harkens back to what me and you were talking about in the Maquis when we did that retrospective.
Right.
And connecting the importance of the Maquis and what that whole concept of the Maquis, what it meant. It was Ro basically literally bringing up the things that me and you have brought about in that breakthrough about how the Maquis was seen as something bad because it went against Federation ideals. However, the Maquis was something that was needed because there was something that the Federation could not handle because it goes against their ideals, which was the Cardassians.
Well, also, if they did, they would run the risk of ending a already shaky truce.
A shaky truce.
So they were stuck between a rock and a hard place.
And like Ro basically standing fast on her decision, but saying that she does regret that basically hurting Picard because she knew that her decision would damage their relationship because, yeah, he taught her everything he knew and he was the teacher and she was the protege.
He was the only one that could make her work.
Yeah.
She was so damaged. She had no friends. Her career was coming to a screeching halt. In fact, I believe no one wanted her on board their ships. She couldn't get a standing position, I believe, on any ships, if I remember correctly. And Picard, I don't want to say he took pity on her. He saw something in her. And he used, his own wisdom as a captain to help shape her into being a better officer. And she did. She became a vital and important member of that crew over the course of, I believe, a couple seasons, or at least over the span of 9 episodes. And with those 9 episodes, they were never just useless filler episodes. They were always there showing, for the most part, it might have been 1 or 2 that were not as significant, but for the most part, it was about her and Picard.
Yes.
For the most part. Or her problems with her culture. And her
relationship with Riker.
Yeah, yes, and her religious beliefs.
Yeah. And dude, the emotion that was said between that was conveyed by both Ro and Picard, I think is probably the most dramatic. More dramatic than even the Beverly Crusher stuff, because the Beverly stuff was uncomfortable to watch
and also expected.
The thing between Ro and Picard, I feel, was something that Star Trek fans, especially of TNG, we needed, because like the passion that they both hit each other with in that scene is it's almost like it was a pent up thing that never was that we could finally have closure on. The whole argument of the Maquis is basically down to that. It's down to the closure was between Ro and Picard. Both sides were right in what they did, but they basically all regret the choices that they made.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the choices that they regret, but they just regret that it went in that direction.
The direction.
Yeah.
Went in that direction, because I'm sorry, when she looks at Picard and she's like in tears and she just says, the one thing I regret is like, I wish you could have seen me for me. And then you flip it and you see Jean-Luc's reaction, and it is more painful than him coming to the realization that he just told his son, Starfleet is the only family I need.
Yeah. Well, the difference is that certainly that's blood, right? His son, but he doesn't have a history.
He doesn't have a history.
So it would make sense that this would be, that much more emotional, at least in a scenario like this, because he has a history with this person. And not only does he have a history, but he was betrayed, which obviously he takes
personal.
He takes it very personal, and he should. But that scene, Michelle Forbes has always been a great actor, and she has gotten so much better over time. And to have her, and Patrick Stewart in a scene together, I want to say in positions of their life where they're both better than they were during the era of The Next Generation, and to see just the two acting talents work together, they sold an entire scene and gave us closure in about 25 minutes.
Yeah.
25 minutes. So her appearance wrapping this part of our discussion up, her appearance made perfect sense, especially when you see, and I'm a little saddened by this, how Metalis is working diligently to bring full and complete closure
To a character.
to Patrick Stewart's Picard.
Yes.
When, in a lot of ways, that's what this season's doing. And that's why I'm not getting mad at the so-called fan service. I actually had some people reach out and ask me about that because people know who've listened to us for many years now know that the thing that I just can't stand for is meaningless fan service.
But this is not meaningless.
And people said, well, this has lots of fan service. I'm like, yes, it does, but none of it is meaningless.
Exactly.
All of it, if you look at it, there's a strategy. It's not just about bringing the next generation cast back together, which is what I was afraid was going to happen this year. I thought this was just going to be an ensemble cast show. They're going to throw out the playbook that was Star Trek Picard, a story that centers around one key character. And what they're doing is they're staying true to their concept, despite what I had thought prior to the start of the season. And they're using Picard's history, which includes TNG cast members,
yes.
in order to bring final closure to this man's story.
Exactly. And that's the whole thing that I was like,
It's about him.
It's
and
about
that's why it's
him.
working.
And like, this is what I feel we should have gotten in season 1.
David,
because the
stop
whole
bringing us there.
I know. But like the whole point of taking a series and making it about Picard's legacy is not to bash Picard's legacy like what they did, where they belittle him. They make him look like he's
You're talking about in the first season compared to what they're doing now?
first season and part of season 2, where they make Picard look weak, where he's not the Picard that we all know, right? Here, they're taking his legacy and just basically saying, yes, he did fantastic things. He did great things, but it comes at a cost. Legacy comes at a cost. And I think that, especially after this episode, that is one of the core things that I'm getting from Metalis's story when it comes to his overall themes, is that everyone's legacy, while you might have a great legacy and a good legacy going forward, something to be proud of, there's always some cost to your legacy. There's cost to your choices. We see that with his relationship with Beverly. Because he made that relationship with Beverly, he never had a relationship with his son. Because of the decision he makes saying, the Federation's the only family I need, and said it to his son, regardless if he knew it was his son or not, that is still basically saying that you don't need a son. That's what you were, that because you made that choice. The Federation is your family.
See, and that's an interesting perspective, Dave, that I didn't really catch until you said that now, because now let's expand your idea further. Because he chose Starfleet over family, right?
Yes.
Well, he also chose Starfleet over Ro.
Over Ro. Exactly.
That is why what Metalis is doing works for me, because you can argue that it's fan service, but it's fan service with true intent.
With true intent.
Everything that's being pushed through this season, there is a motivation behind it that matters. And at the end of that is, in fact, the goal to make or to give closure to Picard and to finalize the last bits of story we haven't seen, that we've had questions about, perhaps potential open strands of narrative that date back from movies as well as the TV show. Everything matters. It's not about fan service. It's about closing out this man's story in a way that feels satisfying and complete.
And that's how I felt after the Ro and Picard incident, because let me preface this by saying it is not a happy ending. That isn't by far.
No.
What we saw, what happened between Ro and Jean-Luc was not happy. But the thing I do like about it is closure. And it's the type of closure that feels real. It feels relatable. It feels like that is honestly what could realistically happen to two people who make that type of decision, where I'm on one side, you're on the other. I'm sorry that basically we made this decision, but we're going to stand on opposing sides now.
Right.
And this is what happens. This is the outcome. And it's stuff like this is what I love about Star Trek. This is what makes great, quote unquote, Star Trek melodrama, because we get to see more human elements that are more relatable to everybody out there.
That is what Star Trek's always been about. It's been about a lot of things, but the key component is the human condition.
Human condition.
Yeah.
And honestly, the human condition element that we get in the final moments between Ro and Jean-Luc is, I don't want to sound negative about like human nature, but this is what I would expect would happen.
Yeah.
About truly what would happen in human nature.
And again, that scene at the end, right before Ro takes, flies her shuttle into the nacelle of the Intrepid, the fact that Picard is expressing emotion and feeling through a view screen in front of everyone on the bridge.
So they can see it.
At first glance, or maybe at first watch, there may be someone out there that say that is not what Patrick Stewart's Picard would ever do. That's not his character. It is after season 2.
Yeah.
It is after season 2. Go back to season 1. One of the few things that Shaban did correctly was when Picard could not even say he loved Data. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And he said, I have something, I believe his words were, I have something that possibly could be called love.
Yeah.
He couldn't even say, I love him.
Yeah.
Season 2 comes along. He works through all that emotional baggage, the reasons why he's closed. And
then,
now we have someone who can express himself to Dr. Crusher, to Commander Riker, to Jack Crusher, and now to Ro.
Yeah.
And it actually doesn't feel out of character because of what Metalis did in the second season.
Exactly. Because the whole linchpin of everything is that moment that starts Picard on this path of closing out his own personal legacy, is that moment when he hugs Q, because that's the first time he gets to actually look at someone after Q empties his soul to Picard and says, you are special because I see you as special. You're special to me. And then it ends with Picard hugging Q.
Yeah.
Which
that was rough, man. Emotionally.
That was rough emotionally, but that was a man basically coming to terms and basically saying, yeah, I have to be more open.
Coming in touch with his feelings.
Yeah. And like here, we finally get to see him taking everything that he's learned and bringing it over, and actually showing some. Would you say the term is solace, or like he's almost sorry? He shows remorse. Mm-hmm. He shows remorse with his interactions with Riker, with his interactions with Beverly, with his son. You know, the moment, like in the last episode that won me over, is that look that Picard has when he comes to the realization, wait a minute, I remember this moment, and suddenly now I remember that was my son. I said, Federation is more important, is my only family that I need. And then, ding, it hits him. Yeah. And you see that little glimmer of remorse.
Yeah.
Here in this episode, that just comes just like a steam engine right into your face when that interaction between him and Ro, and he basically starts off by saying, like what you said, you broke my heart. Yeah. And this was the first time I think I've ever seen Picard or Patrick Stewart really emote Picard in a very emotional way where he's breaking down.
I think the only other moment where we had a true breakdown, and it wasn't as shocking because he did it in front of Deanna Troi, who already understood him throughout the Next Generation TV show. That was made clear that she understood a lot of his problems because she's an empath.
She's an empath.
It was in Generations when he found out his brother and his nephew
were
had
killed.
burned to death in the vineyard.
Yeah.
And he broke down and cried. I want to say that's the only other time, or the only time until now, that we've seen a man who was he was willing to be emotional in front of someone.
Well, because like at that moment, he's so overwhelmed with grief.
Yeah.
He can't hold it.
Yeah.
And here it's different because he just lets it go, because it's almost like he realizes, I have to let this out.
You know, that's a good point. There is a difference between those. Like, that's a man struggling with grief, with information he just found out, as opposed to someone who's willingly expressing
their own emotional state, what it means to them.
Yeah.
Because like that whole scene, especially since it was something enclosed between him and Deanna Troi, here he is expressing his pure emotions to another person and expressing it to the person that is the source of that emotion.
Right.
His grief, he'll never be able to express that to his brother and his nephew, but he can express his grief right at Ro Loren, who is the center of that trauma of his.
Yeah.
Where it broke him. It broke his heart because of how much he cared about Ro Loren.
Yeah. I know. I mean, there's so much we can discuss still with all of that.
There's so much, dude.
Yeah. I mean, it almost deserves an entire Patreon exclusive show where we just delve into, you know, a third part of Picard's characterization, and we now include elements from season 2 and season 3 of Picard, because I do not believe we've discussed or have done another installment since season 2. So we'll have a lot of content to throw in there now when it comes to the defining features of Picard and what helped shape that.
And thank Metalis for that one.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the controversy that this episode has been wrapped in since its premiere, and it has everything to do with Ro.
Yes.
There's a lot of people upset that they killed her off in the very same episode they brought her back in. And certainly as a fan, I'm not overly pleased that she died. And possibly even critically, I might have some problems. But what could possibly counter any critical misgivings is simply the fact that her presence has been present.
Yes.
Since the beginning of the season.
Since the beginning of the season, because you realize that basically she was the one leading the investigation in the whole changeling aspect that Worf and Raffi have been embroiled in.
She's the reason why they even know of this conspiracy.
Yes.
Is because she was leading the charge in this investigation. And the fact that she was a part of, you know, essentially Starfleet intelligence, she's Worf's handler, and Worf is Raffi's handler. She has been around. This idea has been around since the very first episode. And because of that, I don't feel like Metalis just simply pulled some story aspects out of his ass.
No, absolutely. Because like the whole point of Ro's character, how important she was, really is summed up in like those final moments of the episode where Riker and Picard are going over why did she give Picard that necklace or the earring of hers. Mm-hmm. And then basically Picard, Riker figures it out and says, oh, it's an old spy trick where that's where she kept all her notes and everything within that earring. And then you see like everything that she's been working on. And basically Riker makes the comment, this is her legacy. This is what she's been working on this whole time to try to save the Federation. And that really puts it into more perspective that Ro was not a throwaway character. Ro was a very important character to the series.
Definitely not throwaway character.
Yeah, she's
Definitely
not she's not Hugh.
No.
That's why I brought it up in the very beginning is like you compare I've seen the complaints that you brought up that they say, oh, she's just a throwaway character, and they essentially fridged her, which is a term in comics where you just fridge a character for dramatic purposes.
Yeah,
no.
but that wasn't. See, that scene, her death wasn't about raising the stakes. Her death was simply a way to remove players off the board that were no longer needed because it's already getting filled with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And in doing so, yes, it does raise the stakes. Absolutely. It raised the emotional stakes for our core characters. But at the end of the day, it's not about Ro. Thank you for giving us Ro and using her in this way, but it's about Picard.
It's about Picard.
And
it's about
what the actions, what took place in this episode, what it's going to do to for the ever evolving story for this character and his closure. That's what it's about. And that's why I'm not mad. And it doesn't feel lazy to me. Certainly, I feel like it could have worked maybe even better if you had introduced her maybe an episode prior, kept her around for at least 2 episodes. Maybe it would have felt a little smooth. And I don't feel like, you know what? No,
because I was going to interject.
You know what? It's fine how it is. I'm not upset about it because it feels so right. The way it was executed was so perfect that it really doesn't matter how they removed her after using her and getting what they needed.
And the thing was, I was going to interject and basically say, no, it is the perfect way of of the way that she's used, because it added that gravitas to the problem that all the TNG crew have to figure out now, which is the changeling. The threat of the changelings really puts it all together, their threat.
Yeah. The thing is that nowadays people get a little more upset when characters are killed than even in years past, because in years past, we didn't get the never-ending stories, the never-ending franchises. Yeah. Meaning if a character died, you're like, well, they served their purpose. And that's it. Now, if you kill a character, people are like, but we could have done a spin-off. We're going to get more. We want her around more. So they're thinking of the future rather than the immediate. Whereas in years past, people didn't have that mindset, because whatever happened in this closed Star Trek series, the jig is up by the end of the series anyways.
Yeah.
But now in the day and age where nothing dies, it's changed the mindset and the expectations of a lot of fans. And now when you kill off a character like this, people are like, well, there's so much we could have done.
Yeah.
But her story ended 30 plus years ago, technically. Yeah. And now they're using her simply as a way to give closure to our main character. So in the end, I don't really care that they killed her off. I'm glad they brought her back and did what they needed to do.
Yeah.
And now moving forward, it's over. It's done, and now we can move on. All right, so let's talk about Worf.
This is actually kind of the stuff that I was a little giddy about too. Just seeing the interaction between him and Raffi, and the one thing that has kind of perturbed me about a lot of the criticism is everyone complaining that Worf is a pacifist. And I'm like going, in this episode, we kind of see Worf not as a pacifist. He's wise.
That's what it is more. It's more that he's
been through a lot.
Yeah, he's honing that not honing, what's it called? Yeah, he's honing his warrior skills, his true samurai warrior skills. Isn't that what it feels like more? It feels like that is what they're doing with him more than anything, is that they're showing a man who has been through so much war.
Yeah, when he brings up about the fact that I have learned to slow down my breathing and my heartbeat to non-existent levels, and I'm like going, yeah, that's a Worfism right there.
That is a Worf thing, and that's why it's funny, because I like that they're playing into some of Worf's. What's the right words for it? Kind of
idioms.
Yes,
idioms. Really,
just like the little funny over the top things. Like I remember for years it was Worf always wanting to use torpedoes.
Yes.
Like, in fact, that was the joke in Lower Decks. They used it for the Bajoran security guard. That's what they were copying. When Worf always wanted to use torpedoes. And then you'd see him in the background when Picard said no, and he would look all disappointed.
Yes.
And that's kind of what started it. It was the I think it was the first 2 seasons of Next Generation where they really played into that. And then since then, you kind of laugh at some of Worf's things, not because it's stupid, because you're like, oh, that's so Worf.
That's so Worf. Dude, when he's like doing the whole, today was a good day to die. And he gives that really melodramatic speech to Raffi. I'm like going, for a moment, I thought,
It was over the top, but he was performing.
This was
the whole
is how
point.
Worf wants to die. And then I thought about it going, he's not really going to die.
No.
This is not how he dies.
No. I really like what they're doing with Worf. And it's funny that, I suppose he's the third favorite character out of the Next Generation people.
Oh, easily.
I'm
I
sure
think.
there are people out there who are just 100% about Worf. For years, I was.
Oh, yeah.
But when you look at how the movies have been shaped and the TV shows, some of the best stories and the stories that have stood the test of time, yes, Worf is a part of them, but it is usually Picard and Data.
Picard, Data.
Followed by Worf.
Because of all the stories with the Klingons. Because the Klingons were a huge story point in TNG.
But his story in Deep Space Nine is what really took it to new heights.
Yes.
And that's what they're doing so well with this. They're taking all of his history from Next Generation, from the movies, from Deep Space Nine, and merging it into this character. And I feel like there's credibility there. It feels realistic. Like this is, in fact, what would happen to Worf after years of going through war.
Of going through war, he would literally come to a point where he's like, yeah, okay, I've done it all. I've learned everything. I'm at peace.
Especially when he was so opposed to how Gowron was running things during the Dominion War.
Yeah.
And the way he was treating his people. It makes sense to me that this is a guy who's not grasping at power, but actually working behind the scenes to correct injustices. I mean, especially since the one scene that I will always remember, especially from Deep Space Nine, is the scene when he kills Gowron and he does the Klingon yell. Yeah.
In the very end when he kills him.
That's to let the souls go, right?
To let the soul go.
To
Stovacor. And it's like, you go from that to this, and it's like, yeah, that makes sense. It really does, because like he's been through so much trauma and war and battle,
and he lost Dax. And come on,
and yeah, I'm sorry, he lost Dax. Yeah. And that was pretty sad.
Yeah,
but like when you get to that, yeah, you probably would reach a Zen point state at that point,
right? Either that or slit your wrist. All right, so Picard, Riker accompany Shaw. Who's Sean?
Sean.
It's Shaw. Picard and Riker accompany Shaw, humming a tune while he was looking rather pleased with himself in the turbolift because he was finally getting rid of his heartache.
Is this where you finally came to terms that Shaw is your spirit animal?
Oh yeah.
But he's just whistling. Oh, I'm sorry. I feel chipper today.
Yeah, I loved that scene because remember I was talking about referential aspects in Star Trek or just in things in general. This was referential, in canon reverential. Also, while kind of giving a wink to the audience, hey guys, I'm going to do a little callback on some things. When he mentioned, when Riker first used the defense that we use as fans, that's why I say Metalis is a fan, because Riker said what we always say. Don't act like they didn't save the universe, please.
Yes.
And sure enough, Riker uses that. He says, we've saved the universe, more than 3 or 4 times.
Yes.
And then he says, on the other hand, he's all... what does he say?
You didn't crash the saucer section of your ship.
He's all, he's all, you might want to remember that you crashed the saucer section of the USS Enterprise into a planet. And then when someone, and then he tilts his head at Picard, violated the Prime Directive so they could snog a villager on Baku.
Cool.
Or when they nearly wiped out all of humanity with a time paradox.
Dogs.
I mean, how did he finish that? The chicken and the... It's a real chicken and the egg thing
it's
happening.
It's a chicken and the egg thing happening.
Yeah, like what came first? You saving the universe or you destroying the universe?
And I was like going, I think Shaw has become everyone's fan favorite now because of this. Because Shaw is the one who's the ultimate realist. I hate to say that because, we always use the action. Well, look. The Enterprise crew is awesome because they're the ones who saved the day. They're the ones who saved the world. And Shaw is the one that basically is like, the reason they have to save the day usually is because they screwed something up.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Man, this episode, it was firing in all cylinders. It really was. And of course, we have the changeling stuff now. And, and David, you were right yet again this season.
Thank you, Dr. Crusher.
The changelings are evolving into something kind of different. Now, I didn't completely poo-poo on that idea, Dave. I said, no, they're not gonna evolve. Like and I even used the analogy of if you take Klingons to another planet, they're not gonna suddenly grow 5 arms. So yeah, it's all about the execution because the way they explained it and described it actually fits with what we know of changeling canon.
Yes.
Now, this also might work. This also might go retrospectively. I might have to go back and change my thoughts on the communication aspect. When we saw Vadic communicate, with assumingly another shapeshifter,
yes,
which just felt weird. But okay, so according to the Star Trek wiki, and this started jogging my memory, and I just remembered all of these things as I was reading through this. Changelings can take virtually any corporeal form. That much we already knew.
Yes.
They also had the ability to closely mimic humanoid personalities. Okay, that much we knew. They could transform parts of themselves into smaller electrical devices like a comm badge.
Yes.
And make it operational. And we're also capable of at least mimicking the shape and operation of a computer.
Yes.
So changelings could also mimic the form of fire and clouds, which that I did remember because I even suggested that they were the actual biological entities
that were in the nebula.
So Dave, looking at this formal canon here, this analysis, or I should say what did I do? I'm losing my mind already. I'm losing my train of thought. After going through what the Star Trek wiki reminded us of, I can easily say, okay, you know what? Then the communication aspect from last episode definitely could work with a few explanations. And the evolving aspect also makes sense as well, because we've seen them evolve in Deep Space Nine. I didn't think they could evolve to that point, but now it makes sense also because if you think about how Odo was unable to completely copy the form of a perfect humanoid or a human because he always had that bridge, whereas the other changelings, I believe they said at one point they also struggled taking on that form, but then as the show progressed,
they got better.
They got better at mimicking humans. So they have adaptability and, of course, the attribute of evolving.
Yes, especially when you throw in the adage that they get stronger with more people, with more of them bringing information back. That was the point of Odo.
Yes.
The reason why Odo was able to do a lot of the things later on was because he connected with the Great Link and he learned how to do things.
Right.
But on the flip side, they also learned things that Odo brought in.
Right.
And that's what made them stronger.
Uh-huh. So almost like, I don't want to say it's a simulation, but it's almost like that. It's a shared consciousness.
It's a shared consciousness.
And if they merge with someone who's experienced certain things, they take on those experiences. So the evolution process does make sense. But does this mean just one version of the Great Link, this rebel faction, is evolving? Or is the original Great Link also evolving? And the reason why I bring this up is because at some point we're going to have to address this question. And in order to get that question answered, it seems like the most appropriate character would be Odo.
Yeah.
Now, we know the actor that plays Odo died a couple years back of cancer. Rene Auberjonois, I believe is how you say his name. He died, unfortunately. However, in this day and age, CGI could easily work, especially when you're dealing with a character like a shapeshifter. You can create excuses. There's things you can do.
Well, especially
normally I'd say no, leave it alone. But as we can see, Metalis seems to be able to take ideas that seem kind of silly and make them work. But my point, I'm digressing here. My point is, do you agree? Let's pretend Rene Auberjonois is alive.
Okay.
Odo if he was alive, Odo has to be a part of the show.
Absolutely. 100%.
Okay, so now he's dead. Do they still find a way to make him a relevant component of the series?
I thought about it because you mentioned this off the air when we were discussing notes and stuff, and it gave me time to think. And I think that, yes, Odo, there's still hope that basically you could still bring in Odo, but he's not going to look like the Odo that we remember. And here's why I think that the way that they can play it off like this. Odo joins the Great Link. So in essence, Odo achieves his perfect form, meaning he's able to assume any identity, any look he desires.
He looks like Kira.
Oh, dude, what would you do if like she shows up and it's actually Odo?
Oh,
and then everyone's like going, wait, you're not Kira. Odo's like, I like this form.
Yeah.
And it would make sense. I would like, oh yeah, Odo, yeah, you do you, man.
David, please don't say that because that means it's going to come true, and that's awful.
But in all honesty, you could bring the character of Odo back and like he assumes a different form.
Yeah, there's a number of ways they could do it. I'm a little hesitant about him taking on another form, but I also feel
if he's also hide,
it would feel remiss from not. They're dealing with the changelings.
Yes, and here's the thing:
Odo has to be a part of it.
You essentially by the end of this episode, you have basically made the threat that everyone cannot be trusted in the Federation because the changelings have infiltrated Federation rank. So Odo could be doing something in the background, but he's in disguise because he has to keep himself hidden. He doesn't want to interact with the other changelings because especially when you take into context of what Worf has told Raffi, I think it was either last episode or the episode before, where he says there was a break of changeling ranks.
A couple episodes ago, yeah.
And this faction broke off from the Great Link.
Right.
So in essence, so there must be a war or a battle at least going on between the changelings.
Civil War?
Civil war.
Yeah.
So Odo, of course, would probably be front and center there on the side we'd be hoping is good.
Well, 2 episodes from now, the episode's titled The Dominion.
Oh, God, dude. Do you think that's going to be the time that we get to see Odo? Because that would be perfect. That would be absolutely perfect.
I hope.
Now,
it would feel really strange if we don't use Odo.
I want to toss out my crazy theory now.
Wait, we're not even there yet. Wait, you have a crazy theory for this?
Yes.
Oh my God. All right, let's hear
because
your
I
idea.
think it ties to Jack.
And then we're going to run some bets on the side and see if you're going to be right. I'm
Okay.
going to put my money on you.
All right. Hear me out because
Keep it brief though. We're running out of time.
Yeah, we have 5 episodes to go. I don't think Jack is full changeling.
Hold on. You never said he was a changeling.
No, but there's a lot of talk that obviously he's connected to the changeling somehow because he's having those stupid visions.
He has some connection, whether
He has some connection.
Yeah.
They're saying that he must rejoin us. Come find me and stuff like that, right? I don't think he's full changeling. I think he's partial. I think because there's going to be a moment when we find out that as a child, he had an accident and Beverly had to do something to save her son. That basically, I'm going to say she put some changeling organics inside of Jack to save him. It would make sense.
That's an interesting idea, and it's not as ridiculous as you had promoted it as being.
Well, no, it is a little far-fetched because that's a lot of leap.
You know what? I don't.
Are you going to join me?
I would actually be okay with that. That would make a lot of sense. If she also, it would bring more. What's the best way of saying that? It would actually,
to me,
shed more light on her decision because we still don't know why she ran away.
Exactly. And
Why, if
and
she
we
wanted to
don't know-
she didn't need to run away from everyone and Starfleet in order to keep Jack Crusher a secret.
Yeah. And also, she did make the comment this past episode, your visions are coming back since you've had them as a child.
Yeah.
So she knows that what Jack's been going through, and she knows that it's been going on since his childhood. I think Beverly knows more than what she's alluding, but she's keeping
And
from her son.
perhaps this is the reason why the shapeshifters have evolved, because they have some direct connection to a hybrid, and they were able to realize, or at least come to a general understanding of how to go about transforming into
a hybrid.
essentially an organic body that reads as organic with organs and actual blood.
And actual blood. And think about this too. Now this takes it even further if you want to think about the changeling genetics. The importance of Jack as bringing him back to the Great Link, or whatever Great Link this rogue faction is creating. His genetic code is tied to Jean-Luc Picard. How much potential and knowledge can they sap out of his genetic code? And I know it sounds far-fetched, but think about Nemesis. When Shinzon, the power of the fact that they cloned Jean-Luc and made a darker version of himself. And that's what Shinzon was. Shinzon was the darker version of Picard. Think what the changelings can do. They can make a perfect Shinzon.
Yeah.
And Shinzon arguably was the most dangerous villain that the TNG crew has ever faced.
Yeah. Well, David, we're going to find out soon enough. Give me 1 second. My mic's going out.
Okay.
So we'll know soon enough. We only have 5 more episodes to go. So we're getting to the end of our final season of Picard. We're halfway through. Jack Crusher is having a psychotic break. That's where we'll end our discussion for today. I'm going to get this episode at 95%, Dave. How about yourself?
I really love this episode, dude. I'm actually going, for the first time, I'm going higher than you since we started this series. I'm going a 97
Okay. Yeah.
with this episode. I thought this episode was fantastic.
Yeah, it was good. All right. This brings us to the end of our show. David, thank you.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.